Okay, so hopefully cutting through the fogginess, that's the goal of today. Like I said, really the goal is to make you all the most prepared for Git and GitHub of any of the cohorts that have gone through so far, because it is a continual source of frustration and angst. And so, this is a lecture that has never existed until now, and it's here specifically to try to avoid some of that. So here we go. So the agenda today, we got a lot to cover. We may not get through all of it. We'll get through as much as we can. I want to talk very briefly about Git versus GitHub versus GitKraken, right? I think it's easy to conflate all of these things, but they are separate. And so it's important to keep them in your mind as separate things, okay? We'll talk about two different ways of creating a repo. That's going to be creating a repo to start and then adding your project to it, or starting with an existing project and then making that into a repo, okay? We'll talk about adding collaborators. We'll talk about branching. Branching is, I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on branching. You all didn't do any branching last term, is that correct? Okay, so maybe a little bit, some of you. All right, so we'll talk about branching. Then we'll talk about pull requests. We'll talk about pull requests mostly from branches, but you can submit pull requests from forks as well. We'll talk very briefly about forking. And then I want to talk about stashing, which is another area where people have had quite a bit of confusion in the past. And this is partly because stashing can happen automatically if you don't commit your changes before you pull, right? So so that can be difficult to work with. And then we'll sort of conclude with just some general workflow recommendations, like how to, if you follow these general principles, you should probably most of the time be fine. That doesn't mean it's always going to work out. I've worked with Git and GitHub for a long time now, and I still have times where it's like, what in the hell is going on? And it's just broken and it won't be fixed, and it's just frustrating. But hopefully my goal is to get you more of a foundational understanding of what these different things are and sort of conceptually what's going on. And then that will help you when you get into those sort of situations, understand what's happening and how to go about fixing it. All right. All right, setup. I'm assuming you all are set up. Is that correct? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you are set up? Okay, great. So that's all of you. Good. Or as far as I could tell, I didn't see anybody who gave me a thumbs down. So you need to install Git, register for a GitHub account, and download GitKraken. All right, so Git versus GitHub, not GitKraken, just Git versus GitHub, right? I like to think of Git and GitHub a little bit like R versus RStudio, right? They are not the same thing. And it's important to keep that in mind because people will talk about Git all the time and they might not be talking about GitHub, right? GitHub is the remote Git hosting service, right? But there are other Git remote hosting services as well, like GitLab and Bitbucket and others, right? So GitHub is probably the most popular, certainly within the R world it is. And so that's what we'll be using. It also has a lot of really nice features that are sort of built in. They have even like basically remote servers that you can use to automate work and things like that. But we're not going to get to that today. So Git is like the engine, just like R is the engine, and GitHub is just the web-based hosting service. Okay, so that's what GitHub is what we refer to as the remote, right? It's what lives online. And Git is just like the engine, okay? And then Git is on your local and it's on the remote. So it's easy to conflate these things, but they are separate things, okay? So it's important to keep in mind GitHub is just a web-based hosting service, and there are others, right? GitKraken is a visual interface for interacting with Git. Okay, so not GitHub necessarily, but Git. All right, so it will work. It will interact with your Git repositories on your local, and then if you have them connected to a remote, it will interact with them as well. And one of the things I really like about GitKraken is that it will show you where you're at. So if your local is behind your remote, like others have made commits on the remote and you have not, right? You haven't pulled those changes, you'll see that you're behind. And similarly, if you've made commits to your local, but you haven't pushed them up yet, you should be able to see that your local is ahead of your remote, okay? All right, so why GitKraken? I think you could very reasonably make the argument that it would be better to focus on teaching all of this content through the command line interface. The command line interface is going to be the most powerful. That's where any like GitKraken is a limited tool. It can only do so much, and the command line interface is really how Git was built, right? So anything that is possible to do with Git, you can do through the command line interface. That's not necessarily the case with GitKraken. But my experience is that most people, including myself, have an easier time grasping the concepts of Git, like branching, when there's a visual interface, okay? So it's easier to understand the concepts when you can see the entire commit history, when you can see where a branch branched off, and then when it was merged back in, and all of those sorts of things. Okay, so GitKraken helps as a tool to get work done, but in my experience, it also helps reinforce and help you better understand the actual concepts of Git. GitKraken also will allow you to do 95% plus of the work that you need to do without moving to the command line interface. There's really only one thing that I have to do regularly that I can't do through GitKraken. At least I don't know of a way to do it through GitKraken. And that is if I have a fork of somebody else's repo and I need to basically sync my fork with theirs, right? So I need to essentially pull for updates, but pull to my fork rather than, pulling to my local from the remote. So that's about the only thing. I mean, the vast majority of the time I'm working right in GitKraken and I don't have to move outside of it. If you do decide to go with the command line interface eventually, that's totally fine. That's great. And depending on your role and what you're doing, that might be best. If you're working with others and they're all doing command line interface stuff, then maybe that makes sense. This is a quote from Jenny Bryan that I love. No one is giving out Git nerd merit badges, and I think that's like so true. We think like, or like I do anyway, think like, oh, I need to do this like through the command line because that's the right way to do it, or that's what real coders do, or whatever. And that's just dumb. Like it's dumb. You can do it however you want to do it, right? You just need to work with tools that make you the most effective. And if that's GitKraken, great. If that's the command line interface, great. It doesn't matter, right? Okay, questions so far on any of this? Sometimes I like to ask for questions just so I can get a drink of coffee. Okay, big picture. Why do we use Git? We use Git, this is like sort of the baseline answer for version control, right? That's like generally the go-to answer, so that we can, not end up with a document that's totally out of sync and like I'm working on one that's 3 versions behind the one that you're working on, and then we have to integrate those changes somehow. And it helps us all work on a document simultaneously that is all in sync, right? But it will also allow you to actually see all the changes to not just a document, but an entire project over time. So if you start a project and you initialize that project with a repo, right? Then you make commits, then you're working on it for, say, 2 or 3 years, right? You can look at the commit history all the way back to where that project started, and you can see how it evolved over time, right? And so if you're thinking about like open science and reproducible research and those sorts of things, to me, this is a pretty powerful framework, because you can show somebody, look, I've been working on this paper for 7 months. This is where it started. I had, I pre-registered these hypotheses or whatever at that time, and then you can see my work towards that. Like I didn't end off clear over here and then shifted over here and then wound my way into some, finding. So that is all about increasing transparency and reproducibility in process, right? You're trying to make your processes more transparent, more reproducible. Because again, not only can somebody look through that commit history, but they could actually fork that repo, clone it, and they could check out any of those commits, right? So they could go back in time to where you were 4 months ago and look at your project then, and then jump forward a month and see where you were then, right? You can do that. But it also allows you to collaborate with others efficiently and effectively if you both know what you're doing, because it can also be quite frustrating, right? If you end up in a situation where you're ending up with like automatic stashing, and then you're ending up with a zillion merge conflicts and all of these sorts of things, right? So if you both are sort of on the same page about your processes, then it can be a really efficient way to work together, all right? One of the more underrated aspects of Git, I think, though, is being able to share your work with others. Typically, when you're working with Git, you're hosting it on a remote server somewhere. So for us, that's going to be GitHub. And even if you don't end up going to, publish it as a website or a HTML document of some sort, you still have the repo, and you can send a link to the repo to somebody else, right? So again, let's say you're writing a paper, you submit that paper for publication, it gets accepted. You have the repo that has all of your work for that paper. It may not have the data if the data are protected, but it could still have everything else in there, all of your scripts, all of your everything, right? And so that's a really nice way to share it. You can also, if you're able to post a preprint with the journal, which most allow you to do that now, you can just have a PDF of your article in the repo, and that counts as a preprint, right?
Hey, Daniel.
Yeah.
Are we going to cover how to upload everything except maybe make the data private or something like that? Because I've been working on projects that I've really wanted to be able to collaborate with GitHub, but the data can't be accessed there. Are we going to talk about something like that?
Yeah, so I'm going to create a couple repos today. So one of them I will just create so that it ignores a data folder.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking, and so I will make sure to do that. One other thing I wanted to mention here, though, in this sharing part is GitHub has GitHub pages, and that's a really great way to actually publish a repo, right? So you just basically have to have an index.html in there, and then it will, transform your repo into a website. And so that's super nice, because then you can push changes to the repo and it'll just automatically update your website, right? It's more complicated than that, but that's how the course website works. It's all linked to a repo. As I push changes, it just updates the website. Okay, so warning that I probably don't have to give to any of you, but this will be painful at times. It's probably already been painful for you at times. My view is that it is totally worth the effort. The payoff is big in the end, but it is more challenging, I think, than people give it credit for. So that's just my view. I think a lot of the reading I do, it's like sort of Git and GitHub are just sort of like things that you're expected to pick up along the way, but it can be quite challenging, I think. The vocabulary to me is probably half the battle, right? I've already used a ton of it today with, remote and whatever. Like there's a ton of vocabulary. And so trying to keep all of that straight and what it all refers to is difficult. But we'll get there. Okay, so GitHub. There are sort of two main ways that I would recommend starting a repo, which I've kind of already mentioned. One is starting with an empty project. The other is starting with an existing project. Okay, so we're going to demo both of these. We're going to start with an empty project. So I'm going to assume I'm coming into a project. I know I want to use version control for that project, but I haven't done anything yet, right? I've literally done nothing. I'm getting ready to start working on a project. Okay, in that case, I would use the GitHub first approach. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new repo on GitHub, but it's going to be basically empty. It'll probably include a couple things like a license and a README and things like that. Okay, then I'm going to clone that repo locally, and that'll just give me a folder on my computer, right? Then I can just add things to the folder and start working on my project, and then I can commit and push, and everything should basically just work. Okay, so that's the GitHub first approach. All right, and I'm about to demo that. Are there questions before I start demoing though? Does that make sense why you would do this? So just to reiterate, this is the process I would probably use if I were jumping into a new project that I'd done no work on yet, nothing, and I was, but I know I want to use version control for it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll go to GitHub, and then there's a couple of different like looks for GitHub, and so you may end up here. You may end up more like here. All right, whatever, it doesn't matter. Either way, up here along the top, you'll see this plus, right? So you do the plus, new repository, class, example, empty, I'll call it. Okay, then I'd probably add a description. This is an example repo for class demo. Okay, I'm going to make it public. You do have up to, I think, I don't know, you can make it private too. It used to be that you couldn't do private unless you paid, but I think you have unlimited private repos now, so that's nice. So I'm going to add a README. I'm going to add a .gitignore. When I add a .gitignore, it's going to ask me for a template. So I'll say, yeah, let's do a template. Let's scroll down here and go to R. There we go. Okay, so I have gitignore that I'm adding to it that is specifically for R projects. All right, then I'm going to choose a license. Actually, my favorite license isn't in here, which is the Creative Commons by attribution. But I'll just go with the MIT license, which is a very permissible license. If you're interested, you should probably do a little bit of reading on licenses. At least they are, give different permissions for what people can do with the work that's posted on your GitHub repo. MIT license is a good one, but it is quite permissible. It allows people to, take all of your stuff and change it and whatever, which is most open source. And it sounds scarier than it is because really it's totally fine if people do that generally, right? The reason I like the Creative Commons by license is because it's also quite permissible, but it says you are free to use any of this stuff. You're free to modify it for your own uses, but please provide proper attribution. So basically link back to this repo or cite me or whatever. All right, so then I'll say create repository. And there we go. Here's my repo, right? Okay, now I'm going to go to code. I'm going to just click this here, and then I'm going to go to GitKraken. All right, so I'm going to have to switch my share. All right, this is my GitKraken. So I'm going to click right here, this folder right there. It'll bring me something that looks like this, right? I'm going to say clone with URL. I'm going to browse. I'll go teaching, open that. So user
Hey,
Daniel.
DA, we can't see when you're browsing, just FYI. I mean, just get that you're browsing someplace on your local, but we can't see what you're browsing.
Oh, when I click the browse, yeah, that's okay. So the browse is just looking at the folders on your local. All right, then right here, I'm just gonna paste in that link that I got before, right? And then you can see the full path where this is gonna go, right? It's gonna go users, Daniel, teaching, class example, empty, right? That's the name of the repository. So I say clone the repo. It's gonna say, okay, do you wanna open it? Yes. All right, all we have is this initial commit, which has this .gitignore license and readme, right? That's all that's in the repo right now. So let me switch my share now again. Here. And you can see this is my local. This is where I cloned it to, right? And I have this folder up here, class example empty. All right. So there it is. There's my repo. And now all I would probably do is go to RStudio, create a project, say create a project in an existing repository, right? So I can do all that too. Let me switch my share again. Problem is I have to switch my share 57 times, but these are the slides from class today. So then I'm going to say new project in an existing directory. I'm going to browse. Again, you probably won't be able to see this, but basically I'm just navigating to where.
We can see now.
Oh, you can't see that. Good. Okay. So I'm just navigating to class example empty. All right. Create project. And now it's going to switch there. And then we're good, right? So here's my R project. And we're pretty much good there. What I'm going to do though now, because of Chris's suggestion, I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call it protected data. Okay. So the reason I said protected data is because you might have projects where you have some data that you can share and some data that you can't share. Okay. So the way that Git works, right, is it won't actually track empty folders. So at this point, it's not going to track anything in that folder anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and add something to that folder. I'm going to actually just copy. I know you can't see this, but I'm just going to copy the README into there. Okay, so now I have two READMEs basically, and I'm going to open that here, and I'll say ignore, right? Ignore everything in this folder. Okay, so this is not obviously what I would normally include in that folder, but normally I would include the actual data that I'm working with. All right, but I'm just doing this as an example. So now I'm going to come back here, and I have this .gitignore here, right? I'm going to open that up. This has all the R stuff because we use that R template. All right. And all I need to do is add protected data to that list. But I want to show you that through GitKraken because I think that will help illustrate the concept better. Okay, so here we see WIP, right? Work in progress. And so those are the files that have changed since the last commit. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see I have class example empty.rproj. Okay, cool. So I want to do that. And I also have protected data readme.md. Okay, that's the one that I don't want in there. Okay, I don't want that to be there. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to go back to RStudio, and I'm just going to here say protected data and add a slash. Okay. Now, when I go back to GitKraken, you will see that protected data folder, the README file in the protected data folder is gone, right? It's not there for me to commit anymore. But .gitignore is, right? .gitignore has been updated, and so I need to commit that change, all right? But now anything I put in that protected data folder, whether it's data or not, it could be anything, right? Anything I add there will not be included in the repo, right? So cool. Let's stage those changes, and we'll say added project and empty protected data folder. All right. Now I can just push, and then we'll go back to GitHub. And when I refresh, you'll see now we have the rproj there, right? And the commit that was made there. Okay, so that's the process. From here, now we could go to settings, and we could say manage access. And then we can invite collaborators, right? So I could invite Brock. Okay, so now Brock has been invited, and then he's a collaborator. Okay. So that's basically the process. Then from there, we could do a whole bunch of other stuff, which we'll talk about more here in just a minute. But are there questions on that? All right, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so that's the process that I would typically use if I were starting a project and I knew from the start I wanted to use version control. All right, let's imagine though that I've been working on a project for a while. Maybe it's preliminary, whatever. This is actually more the way I find myself working. And then I get fairly far into it, and it's like, oh, I need to use version control with this thing, right? So if you're going to do that, then you have a folder already on your computer, and it's got some stuff in it, right? Then what you need to do is you need to initialize the repo locally, then go to GitHub and create an empty repo, okay? It needs to be totally empty though. So you're not going to include the license, you're not going to include the README, nothing, okay? Then you're going to connect your local to your remote, and then you're just going to push the changes, okay? So I'm going to demo that now, okay? So first, let's go to our studio again, and I'm going to say new project in a new directory, new project. I'm going to go in teaching again, and then I'll say existing repo or existing project. Okay, I could create a Git repository or use Renv or whatever. I'm not going to do that now. If you want to do that and explore on your own, that's totally fine. Renv is great. It's not related to Git at all, but it's a way to help you manage package versions, which we won't really talk about. But all right, so I'm going to create a project. That'll switch me over there. And all I have at this point is this, right? So let's say I create a new R script, and I say, all right, library tidyverse, and then mpg. We're going to go, all right, ggplot, mpg, AES, displ, and highway plus geom point plus geom smooth plus and then maybe labs. All right, so then I create a plot that looks like that. So great, right? And then I'm gonna say, okay, GG save, and maybe I'm gonna create a folder here called plots, and then I'm gonna save here, plots, amazing plot.pdf. All right, and now I'll go back to my files, and now I have this, and I have plots. Okay, and there's my amazing plot.pdf. I'm going to create another folder here. I'll call it scripts, and I'm going to save this script into scripts. Call it create plot. Okay, so this is a project now that I'm working with that is existing, and I want to use version control on it now because I've gotten to the point where it's like, yep, this is something I'm going to keep going with. It's not just something I'm just going to throw away. So I'm going to use version control. All right. So what I'm going to do is first go to GitKraken, or not GitKraken, sorry, GitHub again. All right. So I'll go to Safari. And then I'm going to say new repository again. What did I call this? Existing project. All right. In demo of creating. Okay. It's going to be public. I'm not going to add a README or a git ignore or anything else here. Okay. I'm just going to leave it totally blank. Right. So I'll say create repository. Okay. Now it looks like this. Looks kind of weird. There's nothing in there. All right. So let's go to GitKraken now. Okay. Now I'm going to push this folder again. And I'm going to say init. Okay. Local only. I'm going to browse and find my existing project. Okay. Except this is one thing that is kind of weird. I actually need this to be one level outside of this. So I need to go in teaching, and then so that the full path says I'm initializing it in users Daniel teaching, but the full path is users Daniel teaching existing project. Okay, because you have to put the name up here. So that's one part that's a little bit odd. Okay. The default branch I'm going to say is main. Okay, that's what it is by default. So that's great. And now right here is where you can do the git ignore and license options. Okay, so .git ignore. I'll scroll down. For some reason, this one doesn't work as well with the searching. So license, again, I'll just go MIT license. Cool. All right, and now I'm ready to go. Questions on any of that? Does that make sense? All right, so I say create repository. I want to show you something real quick here, though. So if I go to my, so right now, the way I have, oh shoot, pre-object. I misspelled it. All right, so I have hidden files. This is okay because it allows me to show what I was hoping to show anyway better. I have hidden files shown. Hidden files are anything that starts with a dot. Okay, so on a Mac anyway, it's Command-Shift-period that will show hidden files or not. And I'm not sure what it is on Windows. And from what I've seen, some people on Windows, it just shows hidden files, and for others, it doesn't. But I think this is kind of an important part where it's nice to see the hidden files. Okay, I have a hidden file folder for .rproj.user. Okay, that's part of what goes into the git ignore. So I'm going to actually close this. I'm going to trash, if I can. I'm going to trash this existing project. And then I'll go back to GitKraken and I'm going to try this again. All right. Init existing project. Almost did it again. All right. Main.getIgnore. Or see if it'll work. Nope, does not work. I don't know why. R license MIT. Okay, create repository. All right, let's go look and see. Oh my gosh, I misspelled it again. One more time. Init existing project. That's spelled right, right? Just do it like this just to make sure. Okay. All right. One more time. R MIT create. Okay, there we go. All right, so now you can see I have this initial commit, which is that git ignore the license and a readme. But then I also have this whip, right? So that's everything else that was already in the project that I haven't committed yet. It doesn't make those commits for me. Okay, so that's cool. All right. But what I also wanted to show you is that if I come back over here now and I have hidden files shown, you can see now I have this .git folder. Okay, so that .git folder is all of the engine basically to do all of the version control stuff for you locally. All right, and then you can also see .git ignore there, which you can open with other things, like you could use Sublime Text or VS Code or even RStudio to open that file directly like that. Okay, and so once you have that .git folder in there, I would never go in the folder, but that sort of shows you, okay, this is a repo and its version control is being used and whatever. All right, so now I'm pretty much good here, but I can't actually really do anything yet. So let me come back here. Because if I tried to, like, so here I'm going to commit these things. I'll do it in 2 commits, create it, or made an R proj, and then created a really amazing plot. Okay, so I've committed both of those things. If I just try to push right now, it's going to say there's no remote. So where are you trying to push to, right? It has no idea. So it says, would you like to add one? And I can say yes, but I'm actually going to say cancel, and I'm just going to do it right over here. Okay, so over here on the left, you've got main, local, and remote. Okay, so I'm going to click add remote, and I'm just going to do it with the URL. You can do it through this GitHub stuff, but I like to just do it through the URL. By doing that, all I'm going to do is just basically copy this part, okay? Just like I would, as if I was cloning the repo. Okay, so I copy that, move back to GitKraken, and then paste that in there, okay? And then the name of it is existing project. I don't know why I have such a hard time spelling that thing. Okay, so now that has, you can see it has added that remote here. Okay, so now I can push, and it's the first time I do this, it's going to say, what remote branch do you want to push to? So I have main on my local, and I want to push to a main branch on the remote. Okay, so that's just what this is saying. I want to push to existing project / main. So that's good. Submit, and then momentarily I get pushed successfully. We can go back to GitHub, refresh, and there's all our stuff. Okay, does that make sense? That was a little bit complicated because I had a hard time spelling, but generally, that's the process. Any questions at all on that? Meg?
Thanks. It's more of like a theoretical question, but you added a license. Can you explain more about like how you choose a license and what's appropriate when?
Yeah, sure. So you're going to have to probably just do some reading on your own on different licenses. There's quite a few different places that you can find for that sort of thing. I think OpenSci, they have a lot of good resources, and I believe they have a primer on licenses. It's not something I'm like super expert in by any means, but basically you should probably always have a license of some sort connected with all of your projects, because it just kind of protects you to say, you know, if this doesn't work for you, then it's not my responsibility, sort of thing. And you're free to take it and do whatever you want with it. But like, if you end up, you know, doing something evil with it, that's not because of me, you know. And then there are times, right, where you might be doing something and you actually want to have a copyright, and you can do that through a license as well. And I think the process is basically the same, but almost everything I do is through open source sort of stuff. So the MIT license, like I said, is very permissible. I like the CC BY. We can go look at it real quick. So this is the one, CC BY attribution 4.0. And like they talk about it here. This is the full license. But basically, you just add it to your repo and then reference the license, and that's it. Good question. Does that basically answer what you were?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Daniel, I have a question, actually 2 questions. I wonder about the pull function on the pull function on GitKraken or on GitHub.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do that right now. Okay. So so I'm gonna illustrate pull, and then I'll illustrate a merge conflict. Okay. So I'm still.
Yeah, I pushed some stuff to your original repo. If you want to, if you don't want to pull, if you want to cause a conflict, I pushed some stuff to your original.
Okay, great. So let me go to my repositories. That's not what I wanted. I wanted this one, your repositories. Okay. All right, so here's the existing project. Here's class example empty. This is one I added Brock to as a collaborator. So there he is. And you can see he wrote trying to make a merge conflict. So I don't know what he did though. So I can click on here and I can see this is, he edited this file or added that file, and then added merge conflict much. Okay, so it looks like you maybe made 2 commits. Let's go back. We can find out by clicking on commits. And yes, so he first added an RMD. So we can click here and you can see he added this RMD. And then you can click here and you can see he deleted all of this stuff. And then he just added this line. Okay, so this is not going to end up with a merge conflict. But what I will show you is just how to pull, and then we'll illustrate a merge conflict after that. Okay, so let's go back to Finder. Okay, I have that existing project going. I'm going to go back to that class empty, class example empty one, and then I'll just double click on the project to launch it. Okay, and you can see though that I don't have that data viz one that he was referencing, right? I don't have data viz. So if I go back to GitKraken, this will actually be another good opportunity for me to share what I was talking about. I have existing project and I have class example empty. Okay, I can see just by looking at this interface right now that my local is out of date. I'm behind the remote. Okay, I am here. This is where I'm at. Main, you can see the little laptop. That little laptop, it means your local. Okay. On this one, this says main and it has the little GitHub icon. That's the remote. Okay. So these two commits have been made and pushed to the remote since my last commit. Okay. So what I need to do is click pull, and that will pull those changes down to my local. Okay. Now, if I switch my share and I go back to Finder again, you will see now I have dataviz.rmd. Okay, it's there. So that's great. All right. And if I go to class example and I actually open that, let me switch my share again, then you can see it looks just like it did on there, merge conflict much, right? But so there isn't going to be a merge conflict in this case because I pulled the changes first. All right. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just make a merge conflict with the README. Okay. So here's the README, class example empty. I'm going to change the name of this to an empty project example starting a repo or something, whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay. I'll save that. Now I'm going to go to GitKraken, and you can see I have one. And also, GitKraken has a lot of these other things, like it has these little icons. That little pencil like that means that a file has been edited. A green plus means a file has been added, and then a red minus means a file has been deleted. Okay, so I can click on that, and you can see this is what it was. This is what it is now, and you can see exactly what changed. So I'll stage that, and I'm going to say changed the title of the README. Okay, change the title of the README. Okay, so I make that commit. Now I'm not going to push this yet because I want to illustrate a merge conflict. All right, so I'm going to go to GitHub, if I can find it again. Okay, and here we are. Now, you can make edits and commits to files sometimes straight through GitHub, which is what I'm going to do right now. Okay, this is not typically how you would do this, but this will illustrate the same basic thing as if I made a commit and pushed it, and then Brock didn't, or whoever, right, made a commit to their local without pulling those changes first, right? So here I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to edit this directly in GitHub, and I'm going to say an example repo for class demo. All right, so that's just slightly different title than what I did before. And I'm going to say, I'm going to make my commit right here, update README. Instead of that, I'm just going to say changed title of README. Okay, so I'm going to commit those changes. Those changes were now just made to the remote, right? So that's the equivalent of if Brock had just done this and pushed them, right? So now my local, I edited this line, same exact line, and I committed those changes. And now, let's go back here. Now I'm at GitKraken. You can see something is messed up, and it knows something is messed up already because it's basically showing a little fork there, or a branch there, even though it's not actually a branch. Okay, but it can tell something's messed up. Let's just say I don't know that, and I click push. It's gonna say, uh-oh, your branch, you know, your repo is behind the remote, which you can see here, right? I'm one commit behind. So you can say pull fast forward if possible, or force push. You almost never want to do this. Okay, this is a bad idea. This is one of the only ways that you can actually fully delete things from a repo is with a force push. Okay, so rather than doing either of those, I would just hit cancel, and then I would try to pull. Okay, and it says poll failed, merge failed. There are merge conflicts that need to be resolved. Okay, to me, this is one of the best parts about GitKraken is its merge conflict editor. It's so much nicer than trying to do these through hand. Okay, so all I have to do is now, instead of having this being, files that have been edited or changed or whatever for your work in progress, this is your conflicted files, and you might have multiple of them sometimes. And I'll get back to that in a second. All right, but readme.md is my conflicted file. So I just click on that, and it immediately takes me into the merge conflict editor. Okay, and I can see this is what it says on this for this commit. And this is what it says on origin main. Okay, so this is what it says on the remote, basically. Okay, and this is what it says on my local. Now I can pick which one of these I want. Okay, so I can say I want this one, and then I can just click save. But one of the things that's nice is occasionally you've made some edits, and somebody else has made some edits, and you actually want to keep both of those changes, right? Well, it will allow you to do that too. I can click both of those, okay? And then I think you can even make edits down here. So like, let's say I want to keep that, but I don't want it to be a header, okay? So then I made a little edit there after keeping both of those, all right? Now, it's not telling me that it's going to keep either of those now because it's actually not exactly either of them. But I can now just say save, and then it's saying this is now asking. I'm pointing as if you can see. This is now where I'm going to make a commit to fix the merge conflict, right? So you can leave the default commit message, but I don't think it's very informative. So I'll say fix readme title merge conflict. All right, and then I'll just say commit and merge. And now we're good, right? And again, I can go and look at my, like let's go to here. Now, if you can see, this is the actual file on through RStudio, right? The README, and it looks exactly like we just made it look, right? So that's cool. So then we can go back to GitKraken, and we can just push those changes now. And we're good. Okay, so now we can go back to GitKraken or GitHub. There's too many gits. And then I can refresh. And there we go. There's the README has been updated. Okay, so that's kind of how you would deal with a merge conflict. The reason that collaboration works so well is because some people will make commits and they will push them. And then you, when you come back to work on it, you will poll first, right? Then you'll make all your edits, you'll make commits, you'll push those changes up, and then they will poll before they're starting to work again too. One of the things that's kind of amazing about Git is I can, so with the README, right? Let's say I edited line 5. I hit enter a couple times and then entered some new information on line 5, and I changed the title, okay? And then somebody else edited line 2, just that second line that's down there in the description. That wouldn't actually be a merge conflict. They could push and I could push, and it would just figure it out, and it would just merge them without any problem because the edits are not out of sync on the same line, okay? So as long as you don't get out of sync on the exact same line, then you're not going to end up with merge conflicts and you'll be fine. All right. I mentioned a minute ago that you can end up with a lot of files that are conflicted when you have merge conflicts. That happens most of the time when you are committing files to your repository that are generated automatically. Okay, so let's say you have a website that you're building. Every time you click build website, it will create a whole bunch of different HTML files and all sorts of things. And some of those might be tagged with things like the date, right? The date it was rendered. And then if you do that and you push those changes and somebody else does it the next day and they push those changes and they haven't polled first, right? then you can end up with all of these merge conflicts that are just like a date on different HTML files. And so that's problematic. One of the best ways to get around that is to not commit files to the repository that are generated automatically. Okay, so you can just add them to your git ignore. There's some cases where that won't work. Like if you're publishing a website, you'll probably want to have a, if you're doing it through GitHub, you'll probably want to have a docs folder. So everything will be automatically generated and pushed into the docs folder. But as much as you can, if you have a bunch of files that are automatically generated, then you don't want to commit those things, okay? Because you can end up with merge conflicts rather easily that way. Okay, so this is very common, for example, with book down projects, right? You have a couple of different folders that are generated from a book down project, and you generally don't want to include those in your actual repository. So you'll have them on your local, but not on the remote. Okay. All right. Real quick, we're starting to run out of time. I'm a little worried about time, but we're doing okay. So
I guess I can talk about it since we literally just discussed this in the breakout rooms. So from my understanding now, staging is like the first step before you commit, and it allows you to sort of customize what gets committed with what. So instead of just you've made all of these changes and then you have to commit them all together, it can help make things more clear to stage just a couple of changes that you've done at a time, and then that groups them so then you can commit them together with the same message. So it's like the pre-processing before you commit, where you can sort of group things and control them.
yes, exactly. So it's like the pre-step before a commit. So you can stage one file, you could stage 7 files, but you're putting these files together, one file or multiple files, you're putting them into the staging area to say these files are all going to be associated with the same commit. And then you're going to tag a commit message with it, and then you'll actually make your commit. Okay, so it's just that like pre-process before you actually make a commit with some files. Okay, what about commit?
Daniel, I have a question about staging. How often do you leave things in like on GitKraken to be staged that you just keep ignoring and you don't stage? Is that a file you typically need to deal with otherwise? I'm a kind of a zero inbox person, so I like to check all my emails when they're in there. And, having something in there not staged kind of gives me a little anxiety. Do you usually just deal with those in another way?
Yes. So all of the files that you have in a repo should be staged and committed, or they should be ignored. You shouldn't generally have files that are in there that are not committed, files that you're going to stage and then commit, or ignored. Because if you have files that are like work in progress files, and then you're polling changes, that's where you can end up with automatic stashing. So you don't want that. So you should always have, before you poll, you should always make your commits, right? So whatever you have in your work in progress area, that should be clean before you poll, okay? And that'll help you avoid that automatic stashing. And you might end up with merge conflicts occasionally, but you can deal with merge conflicts, right? That's not a problem. Stashing isn't generally a problem either, but it's just a little messier, right? So you should always be, basically, you should be working as soon as you get to like a logical stopping point, come over, stage files and commit them. And I tend to make quite a few commits. So if I have 5 files, I mean, you saw earlier, right? I had 3 files. I had one that was rproj and then 2 that were related to plots. And so I staged the rproj file and then made a commit for it. And I just said created the R project. And then I staged the next 2 files, which were both related to plotting. And then I tagged them with a message about created a plot, right? And so you're going to stage files together based on like how they go together. Like they should all sort of be coherent. This is all related to the same change, same bug fix, or same extension, or same whatever. And then you're going to commit those. Does that help? Okay. All right, I'm just going to run through the rest of these really quick because we only have 10 more minutes and I really want to get to branching. All right. So we're going to commit files. That's that process after you stage. That's to basically say, okay, I'm going to save these changes from that I've actually made to the repository, right? I'm going to commit them to the repository. Push means you're going to push the most recent changes. So before I get there, let me actually talk about cloning first, okay? Cloning is when the entire repo is up there and you don't have anything on your local. When you clone, you download the entire repository, right? So you download all of the files that are up there, but you also download the entire commit history, all right? That's what cloning is. It's downloading the entire project. Polling is downloading just the most recent changes. So you already have the project on there. Somebody's pushed up 2 new changes since you last were there. Polling is just going to pull those last 2 commits. That's all it is. So it's just downloading those last 2 commits versus cloning is downloading the entire project. Okay. Pushing is the same sort of thing. You're going to just push up the most recent commits that you've made that aren't on the remote yet. Okay. So if there's 400 commits in the repository and you make 2 new commits, when you push, it's only going to push those 2 new commits. It's not going to try to push all 402 commits. All right. Branching, we'll talk about in just a second. And then forking, hopefully you've all forked something in the past, but basically the different branching and forking are quite similar. The difference is when you're forking, you're creating a copy of somebody else's repo, but you're doing it on your remote. Okay, so your GitHub account. So let's say, Joe has a new repository that he's working on, and it's some new R project, or maybe it's an R package. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I wonder if I can, extend this because I like these colors and he used these colors, right? So I would fork it, which means I'm not a collaborator on his project, but I'm going to fork it, which is going to make a copy from his remote to my remote. Okay, so my GitHub account now has a copy of his. So it's like cloning, but only from remote to remote, from one account to the other. Okay, and then I can actually clone it down to my local, and I can make whatever changes I want, and I can push those to my fork because that's now mine, right? It's not mine in that I created all of it, but it's on my account, and so I can make any edits to it. Whatever I do, it's not going to mess with his project, right? His project is his, and I can't directly make commits to it. I can't directly change it, but I can make a copy of it to my account, and then I can make changes to it. Okay, so that's what forking is. It's making that copy to your account. All right, merge conflicts we talked about.
Quick, easy question, DA.
Yep.
When you fork it down, this came up in our small group. Just I cloned the book and the class repo, but when I look at my repositories, only the book shows there, not the class repo. Is that because I haven't contributed? I haven't done anything to that, so it doesn't show up in my GitHub?
So when you fork, let's go over here real quick. So if I, let's see, let's go to Hadley. Let's go ggplot, perfect. Okay, so I'm at ggplot. I'm not a contributor to ggplot, so I can't make edits there directly, right? Mm-hmm. But I can click this button right here, fork, and it's going to ask me where to fork because I have multiple accounts. And then you click on your account, and then it's going to make a copy of that repository on your account.
So maybe I cloned the other one, but I never forked it.
Yeah, so then from here, you would clone this version of it, and then you can make any edits you want from there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so branching. Branching is a really powerful approach to collaborating. And basically the way that I would recommend you collaborate with each other is when you're here, right? And you've created a new repository, you've been working on it for a bit, go to issues, create a new issue, and say, whatever, clean the data, tidy the data so we can plot it, right? This is like a description of the issue, what you want to be done. This is very clearly an enhancement, all right? So I'm going to go over here to labels, and I'll click enhancement. All right. That's just going to tag it with that enhancement tag, which helps keep you organized a little bit. And then assignees, I'm going to assign myself to it. Okay. But I could assign Brock to it, whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay. Then I'm going to submit a new issue. I would submit issues all the time, right? Every single thing that you're going to be doing in your project, in your shared collaborative project, you should be creating issues for, because then that helps keep it really clear, like this is something that needs to be done. This is who's going to do it. When you go to issues, you'll see a bunch of issues and you'll see they're tagged with different things. Real quick, we're almost out of time. I know I'm talking like a million miles an hour too, but if we go to the book, you can see there are currently 3 issues, which is pretty good. That's low. And you can see we have new chapter, a review, and review that isn't tagged with the thing, but it should be. Okay, so those are all things that we want to be done. When you create a branch, like just a general rule of thumb, you should create a branch for every issue that you're going to be solving. Okay, so when you create a branch, what it's going to do is essentially create a copy of the entire repo at that specific part. Then you can make commits to that branch, and it will not impact the main branch. Okay, so you call that branch whatever you want. All right, so let's go over real quick to GitKraken. And what I'm going to do is first, I can see just by looking at this that I am behind because Brock made another commit while I'm working here, right? So my local is here, and he made 1 commit since then. So I'm going to first pull. I don't know what he did, but I can look on this and see he removed that line. So he didn't like the line that I added. All right, so that's fine. Cool. So now I have this, and I'm going to create a branch right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just right click there, and I'm going to say create branch here. All right, the name of the branch, I'm going to probably name it something that's related to the issue I just created, right? So I'm going to call it tidy data. All right, so I'm going to tidy some data. All right, now I'm going to go back to RStudio, if I can find this. Well, I tried. How come that didn't work? RStudio. There we go. All right, so this is where I was, right? And here, obviously, you know, this isn't real, but let's see, MPG. Oh yeah, right. I gotta go. Library, tidyverse, MPG. All right, and then let's just say I'm gonna go pivot longer. We'll say calls equal city and highway, and that'll end up with something like this, right? Name and value, that's fine, I don't care. And then we'll just leave it like that, right? Tidied. Okay, so now I have tidied. I'll do it like that. I can render this thing, and we end up with something that looks like this. Okay, cool. Now we have name, city or highway, and then value, which is just going to be the MPG. Okay, so move back to GitKraken. Shoot. And you can see I've got my work in progress. I have 1 file that's been edited and 1 file that's been added. And if I click this, you can see what's been changed. So I'm just going to add both of these, and I'll say tidied a bit, should change names still. All right, cool. So I commit those changes. Notice those changes are on the tidy data branch. Okay, so they are not on the main branch right now. And in fact, if I double click right here, that's going to check the main branch out. If I go back to RStudio now, you will see it's back exactly like it was before, right? And that dataviz.html file does not exist because I'm on the main branch, which does not have those commits made to it. Okay? If I, again, go back to GitKraken and check out that branch, you can see it immediately changes and we get the dataviz.html back there. Okay, so this is now on the tidy data branch. All right, I can then push those changes. Let me switch my share. Come on, why is this thing not working? Okay, I can switch my share, and it's going to say, where do you want to push? I want to push to origin tidy data. So I'm not pushing to the main branch, right? I'm pushing to a new branch that I'm calling tidy data. I submit that, and then it's going to say, cool, you got it. Now we'll go up to GitHub. I know I'm over time. If you need to leave, that's okay. And then, shoot, then I need to go to GitHub. And when I go to that repository, it is going to immediately have this flag up here that says there were recent changes pushed to this new branch. Okay, so it's going to say, do you want to compare and make a pull request? And I can say yes. And then down here, I can link it to issues. Okay, and what that will do is, let's see, where do I do that actually? I can also assign reviewers. So whatever, I'll create the pull request. And then linked issues, here we go. Now I can click here and say, clean the data, which apparently was closed by somebody already. Clean the data, and then it will close as soon as that's happened. Merge pull request. And then that merges that commit from that branch, and that branch might have 12 commits, right? It might be a big commit, and then that's going to merge it with the main branch. Now it's going to say, okay, that's cool. So you can delete that branch from your remote. If I come back here to class example empty on the main branch, you can see the most recent commit was merge pull request. All right, but if I come back to GitKraken, you will see now, it's going to take a second, but you can see I still have tidy data checked out, and it was merged in on GitHub, but the main branch is now ahead of my main branch. Does that make sense? So what I need to do is check out the main branch, and then I'm going to pull. Okay, and that will pull that pull request that was just made. At this point, I've moved on from tidy data. I can actually delete this branch. Okay, so I would say delete tidy data, delete. Okay, so I know I moved really, really fast here at the end because we were out of time, but we do have a lab a week from today, which is going to be a collaborative lab on GitHub, and I'm going to ask you to make multiple branches. Okay, so when we do that lab, I will be hopping around and I'll be helping you work through this process as you go. Okay, if you're super familiar with branching and you've done all of this before, it's probably going to be pretty simple for you. But for my guess is most of you, this is going to be pretty new. And so if you're feeling a little overwhelmed at this point, that's okay. We're going to get there. All right, we'll work through it as we go. All right, I know I went about 5 minutes over, but are there any questions? Okay.
I have a quick question. I know it's over time, but can you explain a little bit more about what is the difference between a main branch and a master branch?
Yeah, so master branch actually just doesn't exist anymore. GitHub made the decision a little while ago to rename everything from master to main. So the main branch is equivalent to the master branch. Does that help? Cool.
Daniel, what is issue on the GitHub? Is it like a notebook or is like a conversation log between collaborators?
Yeah, it's Markdown. It's actually GitHub flavored Markdown, but it's just a way for you to, so through pull requests, you can link issues and whatever. But if you're just filing an issue, it's just going to be in Markdown. You can put code snippets in there and whatever. And it's just basically a way to say, this is something that needs to be done. in this repository, whether it's a bug fix or whether it's an enhancement or whatever, and you can tag it with those different things. You can create your own labels, all of that kind of stuff. And it's really just like a way to track your progress as you go.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And you can assign people different things too, which is really nice. Okay, thank you all for hanging in there with me. I'm sorry I went over. I will not make a habit of that, I promise. But we didn't get through everything I was hoping to today, but that's okay. All right, thank you all. I will see you Monday.